get my mind right.
Talk shoes.
Recorded live.
Well, hello everybody. This is the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. This is your May 8th, 2015 edition. Our special guest tonight is Damion Gonzales, someone who I have been chatting with, I would say, for years. And this is actually going to be the first time I've gotten to speak to him, which I'm actually looking forward to. He's got a bunch of new projects. He's been working on several things as long as I've known him. And he has a really terrible habit of trying to sneak up on you and chat. But other than that, the man is, definitely a multiple threat, and I want to welcome you to the show, Damion. How are you today?
Thank you. I am fine, and I'm very glad to be here.
Where are you coming to us from?
I am coming at you from the planet of Brooklyn, Flatbush.
Okay. All right. And then, what was your weather like today? Here, it was humid and probably in the 80s.
I think we hit about 77. It's humid now inside, but not necessarily as humid on the outside. So it's comfortable. You know, I wore a blazer today, and didn't wear it too long. And of course, taking the subway, wearing the blazer down in the train station, all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a minute, I'm wearing a winter jacket down here. Yeah, but we finally, we turned the corner. Last week we still had some cold wind coming in from Canada, but now I think we're on our way to warmer climes.
That's not bad. Just a few days ago, it was like 40 degrees here at night.
Hey,
actually, it's 40 degrees during the day,
Yeah, I have a friend who lives in Alberta, Canada, and she got snow 3 days ago.
Oh, don't even go there. 2 weeks ago on a Wednesday, I was coming home from volunteering at a school, and while I was on the expressway, snowflakes were hitting my windshield.
Yeah, that's really wrong. In the month of May, you should be seeing no snow.
Yeah, just for people who don't live in the area, Chicago has great seasons. We usually have a 15-minute spring, but one of the things that Chicago will pull on you every few years, it will mess you up in April. You think, oh, Mother's Day, all these things are coming, and we have had one of the worst snows that I remember, even in my lifetime. I think we got like 2 or 3 feet of snow the day before Easter or right around, right on that weekend. And, it was great for us as little kids, but if you have to drive anywhere, if you have to shop, if you have a job, if you have responsibilities, if you have to pick up kids from school, stuff like that, it's just not pleasant. And, anywho. All right, let me ask you this. Damion, did you grow up in New York, or are you a transplant?
I am a transplant, and I'm a transplant from a place that does not see snow at all. I am originally from Trinidad and Tobago, which is the last island in the Caribbean chain. It's 7 miles off the coast of Venezuela from our southernmost tip.
Very cool.
But yeah, so, I grew up where, what people think is hot here was, 7 o'clock in the morning for us.
Okay. And then, and how long did you live there before you left?
I left in 2000.
Okay.
So I lived my entire, I left, I think, 29, at 29, yeah.
And so just, give people a little bit of background on what it is to grow up there and in a immeasurably different culture than the United States.
Trinidad is very interesting in the fact that it's one of those hodgepodge societies that kind of got put together during colonialism. So we were, of course the Spanish, we were one of the places that Columbus, quote unquote, discovered on his third journey. on his third trip. So we were a Spanish colony, and then they introduced a whole bunch of French planters to start plantations, and then we were a British colony because there was a war, and so the British took over the colony from the Spanish, and we were a British colony right up till 1962. So, I mean, that's a little history lesson, and in that time, let's see, we had all the European powers, everybody, came and settled in little places. And then, of course, we had the indigenous peoples. I, myself, am a descendant of the Carib Indians.
Okay.
My great-grandmother was a Carib from Venezuela. And, then we had slavery, of course, and after slavery we had indentured laborers who came from India. But first we had some indentured laborers who came from China who didn't work out because of the heat. And then they brought the ones from India, and that's kind of what our society is. Our society is a mix of all of those peoples. So I grew up, seeing, people of all hues very early on.
Right.
So, which is why I kind of gravitated to New York as opposed to other less diverse cities, because you're kind of accustomed to seeing, that level of diversity, and to be in somewhere where there isn't would have been, I don't know, I think that would have been a little daunting for me.
Well, and you have two things going for you, or going, I don't want to say against you, but you have two things that you have to be mindful of. And the first is, yes, you're visiting a new culture. If you move to a new country, it's usually a new culture. I mean, even sometimes moving from city to city, neighborhood to neighborhood. But then on the other hand, the being mindful of the possible culture shock is probably fairly forward-looking. But then, you left at a fairly late age.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that has to get balanced out somehow, and I'm not sure how that is. And okay, so currently, we're going to go forward and then we're going to go back again. Currently, what do you when you describe yourself as a creative, how do you describe yourself to other people? Where are you creative? What is it that you do? What is it that floats your boat in terms of, I mean, obviously I know about your art, but I mean, tell me a little bit about what it is how you classify yourself as a creative.
That's a very good question, and I'm not sure I have a really neat package of an answer for it. Because I started off, I was in my first play when I was 8 years old.
Okay.
And I got my first acting award at 8. I got my first directing award, theatrical directing, at 18.
Mm-hmm. And
then I was doing that while I was also doing some hip hop in Trinidad at the time. So I was also, a rapper / producer, because we didn't have anyone who knew how to make the music, and I kind of, figured out by trial and error the equipment and stuff like that. So I was doing that while I was acting and directing, and that was kind of my path for
mm-hmm.
about 10 years. And then, it was time to go. It was time to come to the U.S. and be something different.
Yeah, and then you go someplace where not only in the last few years it has gotten completely flooded out, it has crap-ass winters just like we have here in Chicago.
Yes.
And that, I mean, that's taken in its total. That's a pretty big change from how you grew up. It
is.
And go ahead.
No, I mean, you're right. It's first of all, dealing. I think, it's not so much dealing with the winter, because you can bundle up, you can put your head down low, and you can pretty much, you suffer through it, but you're doing it. What's thrown me the absolute most? What's been that? Long days in the summer. Like the way that the days lengthen and shorten, and it's 10 o'clock and the sun is out. That
right.
is that because we don't have that. We didn't have that. I mean, the latest the sun would be up in Trinidad would be like 6:45.
Mhm.
So for me, I get thrown by that every single year. Every single year, I'm like, I'm coming home and I'm like, wait a minute, why is the sun still up? It should be dark.
But what about the other end of that? I mean, for me, okay, I'll tell you where it really messes me up. Now that we have extended daylight savings time, the period has been extended. It starts earlier and it ends later. When daylight savings time ends, typically in Chicago, that Friday you're coming home and it's still light outside.
Right.
And then bam, on Monday when you're coming home, it's dark. Because it's in November. I mean, does that bother you at all, or is it just the longer days, man?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, it takes a while for my body to become accustomed to it, and then it's even worse on my mind. Because I started, and then of course the opposite of that happens in the winter because you get out of your office and it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and it's already dark.
Yeah, or so, you're getting up in the morning and
right.
and the sun still hasn't come up yet, and
exactly.
You're kind of leaving out to go.
Oh yeah. I mean the last couple of years. Well, not the last couple of years, but I mean it's been get up in the dark, come home in the dark.
Right.
And you kind of feel like you're living on some other planet where the sun, or at the Arctic Circle where you're like, you're not going to see the sun for 6 months.
Or what about when the sun is up for 6 months? I think that would drive me crazy.
Yeah.
That part. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go back to your earlier years. So you're into stage production,
mm-hmm.
and then necessity being the mother of invention, you gravitate to musical production,
mm-hmm.
correct?
Yes.
And so during let's say your teenage formative years, what was your life like creatively? And what about the people around you? You know what I mean? The people that you were interacting with to kind
right.
of move your creativity forward.
All right. Well, my father plays saxophone, a little bit of xylophone, and there's a short kind of Spanish guitar called a cuatro. It's got 4 strings, so he plays that too. Two of my uncles play trumpet. One of those same uncles plays trombone and drums. So my family, we start from a musical background.
Mm-hmm.
And me, my veering off into theater, I think was just part of, I don't know, some sort of needy, overt personality that I've always had. Please look at me. I'm over here. Here I am. And I shouldn't have that since I'm the first kid and got all the attention. But
right.
So I have that, and Trinidad's a very we're a very expressive people. So
right.
there was that, and let me tell you, and you're gonna laugh really loud, because Sesame Street was integral to my my career in theater. And this, yes,
I can't laugh at that.
Yeah,
I can't laugh.
But you can.
No, because
you can.
It's brilliant. See, people don't understand how brilliant Sesame Street is.
Sesame Street is, and not only is it brilliant, but in Trinidad, when I was growing up, which you're thinking about the mid to late 70s into the 80s, we had one television station for the whole country.
Oh,
and
okay.
In the morning at 9 o'clock, they'd sign on, and they'd show Sesame Street.
Mm-hmm.
And then after Sesame Street, they'd show some local programming, and then they'd sign off at 12, at 1, and then they'd come back on at 4. When they came back on at 4, what was on? Sesame Street. And this was for years and years and years.
Right.
So you had we jokingly call my generation the Sesame Street generation because this was what we saw before we headed to school, and this is what we saw when we came home.
Right.
And these were also the golden years of Jim Henson with his Muppets, with Sesame Street characters. So, I mean, those sketches, Ernie and Bert and Oscar the Grouch, and I mean, just the creativity and the humor and all of that stuff was indelibly written into our DNA. So we used to act out those sketches all the time.
Right. People in my neighborhood were doing Richard Pryor albums or Red Fox albums. You're doing Sesame Street.
Oh yeah, we were doing Sesame Street. And I mean, when we got older and, everybody saw Raw and Delirious, we all did Raw and Delirious. But while we were growing up, it was Sesame Street.
Yeah.
It was Sesame Street, and then they'd show the Muppet Show right after. That's a double dose of Jim Henson Muppets.
Yeah, yeah. And so, when you talk about that, when you talk about such an influence, and it's like a national influence for you, how did that drive your creativity forward?
It kind of, for me personally, I had no inhibitions about doing silly stuff.
Right.
That's one of the things that as an actor you really should be able to get rid of. All your inhibitions. You have to let go of that.
Right,
you've got to let go. So I was able to kind of let go really early. So I transformed my voice, I transformed my body, I became characters from a really early age, not even knowing that, those are really great acting exercises. And later on, when I was teaching theater and directing teenagers in theater, that was really helpful because I realized, that what I had done is what they had to do, which is to let go, because teenagers never want to look stupid.
Trinidadian method acting.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's but that's for teenagers generally. No one wants to, look like the weirdo or the, the crazy guy doing the weird acting exercises. You get self-conscious, but, I learned early on that was something you had to throw out. And it helped that I was kind of around their age group. I was just a couple years older than they were. So I could relate to, their kind of, reservations and say, hey, it's fine. Look, you want to do this right. You want to become this character. You have to say, okay, my name is Sean, and I'm going to put Sean over in this corner for a second and become this guy over here who's in the script. Right.
Well, and then there are those who try to act who simply can't do that.
Oh yeah. Well.
Like when Will Smith was supposed to play a gay guy, but he refused to kiss, another male actor.
Right.
Because he couldn't divorce his self from the character he played.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And everyone has that thing where they won't that thing they won't cross. For me, years later, it was actually in 2000. I want to say 2002. I was in a play in New York for the it was the Hip Hop Theater Festival. And the name of the play was Burning Trees, and it was written by a white guy. And we had finished the initial run, and we were doing secondary kind of off Broadway stuff. And he replaced one of the actors, so he was playing a role in the play that he had written. But of course, it's a hip hop play, so there's the N-word in there. Right. And I was, I said, listen, here's the line I can't cross. I'm like, I can't have you say that word with me on stage. I can't have you say that word with me on stage.
I get you. And let's. I mean, what was his reaction? And what was the reaction?
We definitely, we talked it out. It got heated, and then it didn't, and then it wasn't heated.
Right.
But he understood, and the thing is, I had justification within the script itself in terms of my character,
Right.
and the things that he stood for.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't because they were friends, but even as friends, he wouldn't have let him cross that line.
Right. Well, no, as long as there's some authenticity for it, it makes sense, and people know how other people behave. People know how people react to things, and I think that authenticity is one of the things that method actors manage to bring to the table in a way that people who are less skilled or less trained generally don't.
Right.
And you'll find a lot of directors will allow method actors to change certain things if their justification is good because they have actually buried themselves in the role.
Exactly.
So, that's not a bad thing, but that's kind of a cool thing that at a younger age, and I don't want to say with lesser experience because you actually came to this country kind of an old ass man and had the experience.
Yes.
You know what I mean? This was not new to you at all. So,
oh no, it wasn't. It really wasn't.
Yeah, and so you're in New York. You're doing, off, like you said, off Broadway plays. When you first got here and you did that Mary Tyler Moore moment and you didn't throw the hat up, but when you turned around 360 and you said, shit, now I'm in New York. What am I going to do? Did you come here already with something set up? I'm sure you came here with a purpose, but once you arrived, because that's a big thing.
Right, exactly.
Go ahead, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, yes, I came with a purpose,
Mm-hmm.
but, and I was pursuing that a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but then, life happens. So, I came here with a purpose, and then I came in 2000, and then September 11th happened.
Right.
And it changed the entire tone of New York. It changed the economy of New York.
Talk about that just a little bit. Everybody else who was outside New York saw it from the outside, okay? But there's a visceral reaction when you realize that your city was not only attacked, but the attack was carried out so well and so easily that you just have to shake your head about it. In the circle of people that you knew at that time, what were you looking at as a visceral reaction to that attack?
All right, so here's the thing. The month before it happened,
mm-hmm.
I was working in the World Trade Center at
mm-hmm.
a company called Aon Risk Management.
Yeah, I know them well.
Yeah. And they lost 95% of their employees on that day.
What floor was that?
That was 96th floor.
Yeah, so you can't slide down the banister from the 96th
No, you can't.
floor.
And as far as my family knew, because the last time I had spoken to them about work and stuff like that, they thought I was still working in the World Trade Center. By that time, because I was working, I was temping, so my temp agency had moved me to Midtown to work at Motown Records.
Okay.
So I'm watching this on a screen in Motown Records.
Mm-hmm.
And
mm-hmm.
my wife calls because she decided, strangely enough, to stay home that day. She got up and said, I don't feel like going to work.
Right.
And didn't go. And she never watches the news in the morning. But she put on the TV and was watching the news, and she's wondering what movie is this?
Right.
And when she realizes what happens, all of a sudden my mother calls from Trinidad, and they're panicking because they're seeing it. And as far as they know, I still work in that building.
Right.
So in my circle, it was really visceral. It was really immediate emotionally.
Right.
But I'm watching it, and we're just stunned. Because they had the bombing in '93, But
in the basement.
In the
right.
basement. But, this is the top of the world falling.
Not only that, but I mean, these are airplanes.
Exactly.
I mean,
That's
nobody in, since the Japanese in World War II was using airplanes
right.
in that manner.
Exactly. So, I mean, and then the images, people jumping, it was just, and then the buildings fell and all the cops and the fire department. It was really, really, it was terrible. It was bad. It was bad. So yeah, that was that. And like I said, the economy of New York totally changed.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't the time to be a struggling actor.
Right.
Because not only was I married, but we had a baby coming. So, and this was the year after. This was like 2002. So,
mm-hmm.
It was time to, say, okay, this acting thing where you'd have to, not be at work to go and stand in the line for auditions for 3
right.
hours. I don't think that's going to work out with, food and,
Yeah, a need for some basic kind of necessities in life.
Right, exactly. So, that had to kind of go to the wayside for a while. While more pedestrian, actual life things had to happen.
Well, I think you described it perfectly when you said that life happens.
Yeah.
And there's really no better way to put it. When you, the moment you share responsibility for life with somebody else, your personal priorities have to change.
Exactly.
And I mean, obviously you need make no apology for that, because that's just what happens.
Right.
And so was it more of a conventional job rather than a creative job that you had?
Oh yeah, it was definitely more. I mean, for a while when I was working at the record labels, because I was at Motown, and then they moved me across to Universal Music, I was around a lot more creative, but then of course it's creative and yet corporate at the same time. So you'd see these artists, they'd walk by you in the hall and they'd talk to you and et cetera, et cetera. So, and you could pass music to them. I mean, guys would, be passing CDs all the time.
Yeah.
So there was that. And I can't remember when exactly that job ended. But then I moved to one of the really most pedestrian jobs ever, which was the Fulfillment Services Department of Pfizer.
Oh, so you became a drug pusher.
I did. Well, I was actually
corporate.
I was actually supplying the real pushers, who are the sales force, with all the information that they would go to the doctors with which to do the actual pushing.
There you go. But I mean, it's probably a good living. I'm guessing by that time, you had a child by then, right? Or at least in that neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, we all do what we have to do. And a lot of people go, oh man, I would never clean toilets. And I'm going, you stupid son of a bitch. If you have to feed a child, you do whatever you have to do.
You'll do whatever you have to do.
Yeah. And there's like 2 things that I practice practically every day, just in case the bottom falls out of whatever I'm doing. And the first one is, would you like fries with that? And the second one is, will that be paper or plastic?
Yeah.
Because I'm not too proud to get another job. I mean, and all joking aside, though, I mean, it's still, so you have that job. Were you able to, keep in touch with your creative side while you were doing that, or was it really something that you kind of buried yourself in, or at least had to do because you didn't have the time or opportunity to do something else?
That job was the beginning of a creative drought.
Yeah. So let me ask you that question that I was kind of holding back. Somebody also asked it in the chat room. When you think of an experience like that, and especially you hadn't been in the country that long, do you think that, I mean, how much of that may have affected your creative bent? And just from my perspective, because I think anybody who lived in New York is entitled to have to deal with some post-traumatic shock. Do you think that there's long-lasting effect from you coming here, being here such a short amount of time, your family being upset because they're not exactly sure that you're there? I mean, all of that has to work on you at a very fundamental way. And are you able to see whether or not that had some long-lasting effect on you and on your creativity and how you conduct yourself in life?
Definitely how I conduct myself in life. In terms of my creativity, I think, because of that and because of circumstances, I kind of had to step away from that. And be, I like to say a norm, be a normal person, and kind of deal with normal life things, which my wife will tell you I'm not very good at. Like you said, life happens. So as a result of life happening and me kind of making decisions based on that and kind of saying, well, listen, this is the lay of the land now.
Right.
And the lay of the land is a lot harsher than it would have been had I come here 5 years prior.
Okay.
People used to say, and this is definitely from a Trinidadian perspective. They used to say, "Oh, the streets of New York are paved with gold," which of course is not true. But it was always very easy for a lot of Caribbean immigrants to come and get work.
To imagine that, yeah.
But also to come here and get work. My uncle's been here since, I would say, 1971. And he used to work at J.P. Morgan. He worked at, I can't remember, but it was at a health insurance place. He used to, he tells me this funny story, how he went down to the manufacturing area. There's a whole bunch of factories in the back of Brooklyn. And you could go there in the morning and just get a job.
Right.
You just show up and there's work waiting. That reality ended. That New York ended. It might have ended even before that, but it definitely ended after September 11th.
Yeah, that was the door closer.
Yeah. So seeing that was the New York that I had to deal with, I kind of said, well, this is what has to happen.
Right.
So for years, I really stepped away from creative stuff. Some friends of mine tried to drag me back into music, and I was doing that kind of off and on, but never really committed to it again.
Right.
The way that I was committed earlier. And then my wife had, she contacted some theater people, and I went and auditioned, and I actually, there was even a theater group that was mostly Caribbean people, Banana Boat Productions, Merlina Rich and her crew, and I started working with them, but this was years after. This was around, I'd say, maybe 2005, 2006.
Okay.
So I really did take a hard left away from it. So and I think that was as a result of the conditions on the ground.
Yeah.
So yeah. My creativity did take a hit.
Yeah. And then, if I have to imagine that, we got to see like two pretty good examples of the resiliency of the people, who live there. We saw David Letterman and the way he talked about, when the first day he came back after the disaster, and also Jon Stewart. So those are two fairly public and very intelligent responses to an absolutely barbaric act.
Right.
And I also don't want to sound like, I'm an automatic knee-jerk, hostile toward, any group because of what happened. Because, first of all, I think our country has really screwed up. 19 of the 28 guys who pulled this off were from Saudi Arabia.
Right.
And because they have oil, we've been sucking up to those guys forever.
Forever.
And you know what? That's rich white folks sucking up. Our entire national policy is based upon whoever can make white folks wealthy.
Yeah.
And I'm probably going to take a hit for saying that. But, well, no, I mean, there are people who are going to listen to all these shows before they decide whether or not they're going to do business with me, or they're going to, publish what I do. They're going to, whatever. But I have enough unassailable facts about how this country conducts itself so that I can fully justify it. And a lot of that, all of that spills over into our creativity. When you talk about, let's talk about Afrofuturism. Let's talk about black art. Let's talk about non-white art. Let's talk about world music. When you talk about all of those things, because the outlets are not necessarily controlled by us.
Oh, I can tell you that they definitely aren't controlled by us.
I was being nice for a second before I jump crappy again.
I mean, here's what I learned while working at the record labels and working at Universal Music. All music in the world is distributed by 3 companies. All music that you hear on radio anywhere on this planet is distributed by 3 companies alone.
Right.
All right? So that's number one. So they control the distribution of all the music. Okay?
Right.
Now, of course, iTunes is a big player, but, it was really Sony, EMI, Universal.
I think iTunes, isn't that owned by some white folks?
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Right. Please continue.
Right. So that's your, that's number one in terms of, like you were saying, all distribution points and where, how we get these things aren't controlled by us.
Right.
It's pretty much the same with let's say televised content.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, and we'll double back to that when we start discussing T.A.S.K. Trust me. So yeah, like you were saying, these control elements, and the fact that we have none of them. It's and how that affects culture, and like you were saying, how it affects us getting Afrofuturism and our art and our voice out there.
Right. I just did a little bit of research recently, and I put a section in a novel that I'm writing about the fact that we have very, very little control over our intellectual property, and that's a problem. Oh, yeah. It's a problem. It's a problem for 2 reasons. One of the most fundamental reasons that I believe is the most egregious is the fact that when we don't control our intellectual property, we can't teach or show our children a different way of life. Okay? And that's pretty important because, the memes that kids pick up are ones that are really, really hard to reverse or change once they get past a certain age.
Right.
And so if we can't present ourselves in a way that's laudable or in a way that's genuine, we're just screwing up another generation of us.
Well, we're screwing up, I believe that any damage that is done to one generation takes at least 2 or 3 generations to fix.
No doubt.
If it gets fixed at all.
No doubt. Yeah.
So there's a whole, we're still suffering from things 3 generations back now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whether it be Vietnam and heroin, or of course the ever-present crack cocaine. So.
Well, remember, crack is a special class in our law enforcement community, merely so that they can impose, a further judicial punishment upon us for being of color,
Yeah.
So, well, let's go back to, we could debate these issues forever, but let's go back to your creativity. Okay, so you're working for Pfizer. You're doing that job. You're making that yang. You're taking care of your family is really what it boils down to.
Right.
To call it anything other than a gig is a lie. It's a gig. It's a gig you picked up to take care of your family because you got other stuff inside you. So when you look at that, okay, so you're doing the thing with Pfizer, and you said kind of like your creativity was put on hold.
Mm-hmm.
When did it start ringing back on you?
Like I said, I want to say about 2006.
Right.
My wife made the call to this theater group, Banana Boat Productions, and they had just done a play that I directed. Years before. I want to say the first time I did, because I directed that play a couple of times. The first time I directed it, it was in, I want to say 1988, 89. So
wow, okay.
I had just come out of high school, and I had directed that play. And they were going to do another play by the same playwright. Oh, there's the alarm. And the playwright who wrote that play was a guy named Zeno Obi Constant. And Zeno he's an award-winning playwright in Trinidad. His plays are performed in the Caribbean hundreds of times. Well, I don't want to say hundreds of times, but over the span of a year, there will be at least 10 schools doing one of his plays. His plays, theater is now taught as a subject for so that kids can graduate and stuff. You can choose to do theater. His plays are on the curriculum. Yeah.
So I mean, he's critically acclaimed.
Yes.
And not only in the culture.
Yes. Not only is he critically acclaimed, but he's also a staunch Pan-Africanist.
Okay.
So he was my father/mentor for about for the 10 years I was doing theater in Trinidad.
Okay.
So, and they were doing one of his plays. And the lady in charge of Banana Boat Productions, Marlena Rich, the creative director, she was like, "Do you want to direct? We're going to do another Zeno play. Do you want to direct?" I said, "I'll do better than that. How about I direct it and act in it?" And since that time, I've worked with Banana Boat off and on, since 2006 to last year was the last time we did something.
Okay.
So they kind of brought me back, to start exploring some of my creativity again.
Sure.
And it was good to get back on stage. It was good to direct. Oh my God. And, I have to thank them, and I especially have to thank my wife for kind of pushing me back, into being who I am.
Right.
And because it really was a push because, it's like an engine on a really old car. And if it doesn't get turned over every so often, it gets really rusty. And there's no oil in there, and it's gunky and it's a mess. So I was a gunky mess for a long time. Yeah. So they pushed me back in, and for a while I was really I was a Hemi for a while after that. So and that was good. That was really good.
Yeah. Someone in the chat room wants to know, when did you start on Stormfront?
Oh, okay. Who is that talking in the chat room?
I don't, they hide in their anonymity. They log in as guests, so they just got a number behind their name. But before you tell us when did you start on it? Why don't you describe a little bit about what it is so that people can know?
All right. Stormfront was one of my first, I'll say it was my first foray into thinking about doing a comic.
Okay. Oh, by the way, I'm to tell you that it's Zach.
Of course it's Zach. I know it's Zach. Zach Zach is...
You can deal with him later.
Yeah. Well, Zach is, of course, my best friend on the planet.
Okay.
We've known each other since we were, we say 7. It might be earlier. And he is my co-creator and co-writer on T.A.S.K. So,
cool.
So
Very
him
cool.
asking about Stormfront. Okay, thank you, Farmer. Okay, good.
Well, he's doing that, for the commercial aspect of doing this show.
Yeah.
Which is cool. Absolutely cool. But tell us what it is. Describe what it is.
Okay, Stormfront was, of course, a comic that I was working on vaguely. Well, not vaguely. I really did a lot of work on it before, throwing the idea away.
Sure.
And it was, of course, these teenage kids, mostly black and Latino, who were experimented on by the U.S. government.
Okay. Very much like me in my early years.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Most definitely. And they were, as a matter of fact, it was kind of a Tuskegee experiment kind of deal where their parents had been experimented on first and kind of laid the seeds for what they would be genetically. And
kind
then
of a generational thing.
Right, and then there was a shadow agency who kind of made sure that this guy married this woman in order to have this kid.
Yeah.
So it was that kind of thing that I was working on.
Sure.
And I even got an artist to draw the characters and stuff like that, and I had done I'd done a series Bible for it. And then I kind of took a hard look at it, and it was a mess. It was a mess because I wasn't writing characters so much as I was writing mouthpieces for my quote-unquote black anger.
Well, yeah. I mean that's not. You can't condemn that because a lot of exactly that angst and anger and frustration does drive some pretty powerful art.
It does. And, it had, and it was cathartic in the fact that, it was something that I dealt with and, I was dealing with my feelings and it was really my feelings towards kind of America that I hadn't dealt with. So I kind of dealt with it through that.
Okay.
But there was a lot of anger and there was a lot of, it really wasn't, it wasn't balanced in terms of, a product.
It wasn't literally pure enough for you. You thought it was probably more emotion than it was literature.
Yeah. And it was definitely, born of my anger and kind of, my looking at and wanting to say something, which is always good because that's what art is. You want to say something.
Right.
But, some of the justification for, some of the things didn't make sense. And when it didn't make sense, then it didn't ring true. And if it didn't ring true, then why am I doing it?
Right.
But Stormfront, but the good thing is, now that I'm older and wiser and I've done a lot more in terms of, because, writing, as being a writer is kind of a progression. So, you write at one level, the level you write at now is not the will of 10 years ago writing.
No, you're right. And I'm a perfect example of what you said. I wrote, when I started writing, I was newly divorced. And I have my own inner rage. All of my writing is born of inner rage, and which is something that nobody ever sees in me. You know, they go, yeah, he's a jokey son of a bitch or whatever. But that's the basis for my writing. And it's a very, very narrow line that you have to walk if you're going to be an effective writer, because you can't let your rage take over. I'll give you a perfect example. When I finished Discovery, which was my first novel, it was 330,000 words. That's 750 pages. And my editor, who was so much smarter than me, and that was the first book I had ever written, she cut out 1/3 of that. Wow. Okay. So when you think about taking out 100,000 words, there was obviously a whole lot of stuff in there, and based out of emotion, based out of, frustration, based out of anger, that didn't move the story along. Didn't even belong in the story. So I seriously, I do understand what you're saying. And there are a lot of people who manage to harness their rage in a way that's very effective. Like Angela Davis, when she writes, she writes, from a generation of rage. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't color her writing in a way that makes it ineffectual or turns people off. Intellectually, it's pure. Right. So, dude, I understand exactly what you're talking about. So how did you manage that process better? Was it slow maturation, or did you reread your own stuff and come to a realization that, hey, this is probably not the best way to make a creative universe and get my ideas across? What was your process?
I kind of had to think about the world, mm-hmm. and kind of look back on where I come from, mm-hmm. and what I wanted to put out there. Did I want to put out an angry, negative
screed?
Yeah. Did I want to put out an angry, negative universe into what is already an angry, negative universe?
Right. Did you want to compound it?
Right. Or
I get you.
Or did I want to,
transcend it?
Yeah, transcend that and kind of bring a new light and a new hope, and just tell a story that was not as harsh and not as angry.
Uh-huh.
And because, then I also had to think of the audience.
Right.
And was my audience going to be a bunch of hardened 25 to 34-year-old men?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or was I going to broaden my audience and really give back my love of, and here's the other thing, my love of the entire comic book genre.
Right.
And just that whole experience of being a fan of comics and and comic book characters, and just that whole wonder of just mm-hmm. immersing yourself in a superhero universe. Did I want to give that back? Mm-hmm. And my daughter is 12 now, but when I started, she was maybe about 6 or 7.
I was going to ask you about that because, and not about her specifically, but having her in your life has got to color your thinking about the future and also about your own identity.
Oh,
you know
definitely.
What I'm saying?
Yeah. Definitely.
So that makes a whole lot of sense that just being married and having a child, again, like the experiences that you had with 9/11, all of that, ends up coloring your, at least one's consideration of where their place is in the universe. And so that's cool to hear. And so did you make a conscious decision that what you were creating was going to be something for youth? And, I don't want to characterize preteen, teen, or what have you,
right.
But something that would be laudable for youth to read and maybe affecting in their psyche, in their, you know, their subconscious reading of what it is that you're putting out there.
Yes, and that was the turning point. Yeah, that was the turning point, because then, you know, I kind of realized that my approach, which would have been good for a certain audience, was not the approach that I wanted, and it wasn't the direction that I wanted to go. Because, you know, there was a love of this whole of comic books and the entire genre that I wanted to pass on, and you know, my daughter gets it now. She isn't so much of an avid comic person, but she will come with me to the comic book store, and she will, you know, she's a fan of the Marvel stuff, and she argues comic book stuff, you know, with kids at school now. So, you know, she cosplays.
Right.
She cosplayed as Storm at New York Comic Con, and she keeps, you know, saying, you know, I want to go back, and I want to do this, and I want to do that. So she's in it now. And I think it's important for kids to want to have that escape and to have that reach of imagination.
Right.
You know, and of course it's good to see yourself or someone who looks like you as a hero. That's really good too. So that was where my head was when I decided, okay, I'm gonna move from doing this thing and move in this direction with something that's more positive and something that, you know, they can get into.
Okay, well, I mean, that's the entomology of where you are now is pretty cool, because, you know, not a lot of people will hit that level of self-awareness and that level of introspection without someone else beating them over the head with it. Because, you know, creatives can be pretty stubborn, and creatives are also fearful little creatures. And you know, if you get locked into something that's safe, that you know that at least, you know, 5 of your friends are going to go, oh, that's great. Sometimes it's hard to rock your own world or to kind of shake things up, because it's hard to think about getting out of that safe zone.
Right.
And so it sounds a lot like you did it on your own.
Oh, well, I had that very same Zach beating me over the head saying, he was saying, oh, what are you making here, Black Power superheroes? And he thought it was, and this is a byproduct, of course, being in Trinidad. He was like, okay, this is really extreme.
Right.
Like, where are you going with this? I don't know I know who's gonna like it, and, you know, it's a really small market.
Where's the angry man who's gonna buy that?
Right, exactly.
I get you. But see, that's, you know, again, that's the value of people around you, which is what I mentioned before. You know, do the people around you help you? Obviously, they help you keep, like, on a good task, or will pull you back and say, hey, you know, maybe you should reconsider this. You know, people who only listen to themselves only turn out what it is that they like.
Right.
And sometimes you can make a miscalculation which knocks you out of the running for anybody else paying any attention to you at all.
Exactly.
Because the fact is, being a content creator is an expensive endeavor. It's expensive in time, it's expensive in resources, and this is not an inconsiderable task that anybody should take on. You know, somebody says, oh man, I'm going to make my own comic book. Well, we've had enough comic book creatives on this show in the last few years, and other people who realize that basically you're an entrepreneur starting your own business. And if you want to be successful, then you got to sell your stuff. And if you want to sell your stuff, it's got to be stuff that other people want to give you money for.
Right.
So in between you and Zach, was the value proposition to look at the marketplace and to see what what kinds of memes, what kinds of creativity, what kinds of characters are most popular, and then kind of moving forward, or did you come up with a creative universe that you thought had great potential, and you pushed it forward on your own?
All right. See, now we're getting into the fun part, because
okay.
Right. So this is the part. Now, that last question you asked, the answer is Zach's input on Stormfront.
Uh-huh.
Zach being a jerk to me and saying this idea sucks. That was his input there.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know you're listening, Farmer, so take that. So that was him being a total jerk and saying, this is a dumb idea. And he was right in some respects. So I give him that. And this, so I realized that this idea is just a little too much. It's not representative of what I want to put out. It's my Ice Cube moment, and Ice Cube, America's Most Wanted moment.
Yeah.
And, I'm like, okay, so this is good. It's good in my head, but it's not good on the page. So I'm going to put this down. And so I walk away from that. I put it down, and I'm done with it. And I go to my friend Matthew's house, Cunliffe Matthew, who is my business partner. And we're comic book geeks, and so we are watching a Justice League Unlimited marathon on Cartoon Network.
And of course, Zach was not invited.
No,
correct?
Well, Zach is in a whole different country, so thank God.
Well, for damn sure he's not invited, because you're not going to pay for him to come there and tell you you're a jerk.
Not just to watch some TV. So Matthew and I are watching, and Matthew was definitely around for the creation of the whole Stormfront thing. But he would look at it and say, "Oh, that's cool, that's cool, that's cool." Zach is the one who was being the jerk. Matthew was being very kind, and we're watching, episode after episode of Justice League, and Matthew says, we should do a cartoon. And that was it. He said, we should do a cartoon. And I look at him, and I'm like, yeah, we should, we should do a cartoon. I should get some characters together, do a cartoon. And that was the beginning of T.A.S.K. So T.A.S.K started with an offhand comment that really should have remained unsaid, but here we are.
And was this, you're watching this marathon, were you pharmaceutically enhanced in any way?
We were very
straight up. You're sitting there going.
We might have had some beers. Just because we're Trinis, and if two of us are gathered in one place, then there must be beer.
It's just polite.
Yeah,
it's just polite.
It's actually a moral obligation. I'll have you know, sir. It might actually be written in the Trinidadian Constitution somewhere.
It could be, yeah. I haven't studied it lately, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, after you said that, I was like, oh, well, I can make some characters. A cartoon shouldn't be too hard to make.
Right.
This is where we cue the laughter from the audience. Because making any level of good-looking, proper, professional animation is a task beyond anyone's belief.
Right.
Especially if you're outside the system. If you are not an artist/animator yourself,
right.
You are definitely, you're stepping blindly where angels fear to tread.
Well, going back to when you guys decided you were going to do that, one of my favorite jokes is, how do you make God laugh?
Oh, yeah, make a plan.
Tell him your plan.
Yeah,
tell him your plan.
So, what happened next was, just coming up with characters.
Right.
And me trying to learn as much about animation and how it gets from point A to point click on your television.
Right. Right.
And when I learned that, I was like, oh, so maybe this is the dumbest idea I've ever had. But I was already now that I started learning,
yeah,
I couldn't pull back from it.
There was kind of a commitment there at that point.
Because if I'm learning all this stuff about how to do this, then I might as well try to do it.
Right. Right.
You know,
oh, wait, how long ago was that about?
That was around 2009.
Okay.
You know, so 2009, Matthew and I started looking at trying to put these characters together, and what would we have to do in terms, how do you get something from idea to animation to then screen?
Sure.
And the steps, if you're outside the system as we are, they're multiplied exponentially.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because you don't have the contacts, you don't have, you don't even, you're not even in the arena.
Well, you're completely outside the creativity loop. You have to identify the tools.
Outside.
You have to identify the tools. You have to learn how to use them if possible, because they're not that simple. And then execution, like you said, to get it to that final point, that's a whole big thing. You got visuals, you got audio, you've got Foley, you've got. I mean, anybody who's done a movie, anybody who's done a cartoon knows how complex it is. It is not. It's not you sitting around watching Justice League and going, "Shoot, man, we could do that."
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so there I am learning how to do it in terms of what are the business steps, and not so much the nitty gritty. How do you draw? How do you animate? Because my hands are good for many things, but drawing is not one of them. Mm-hmm. They're really good for picking up food and shoving it into my face, but and for opening alcoholic beverages, but for drawing and animating, not so much. So of course, then we had to get art done, but we first had to come up with compelling characters, and we had to come up with a good story. We had to come up with we had to create a good universe that people would want to see. Right. So, I started creating characters, and this is the point where I dragged Zach back in. Because, now he looks at it and he says, I could be less of a jerk about this. So I pull him back. And of course, Matthew was there. Matthew was steady as a rock. And he's saying, I like this one, I like this one, I like this one. And when he says, I like this one, I'm like, okay, good, because one thing about Matthew is he has a lot of really good childlike enthusiasm. And it's not to say that he's childlike, but his enthusiasm for things is really, it isn't cynical.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see what you're saying, sure.
Yeah. So he'll give you a chance to hit your stride without saying, that's corny.
Well, it sounds like he doesn't undercut you. And it sounds like you have three very, very different personalities in the three of you, which I would think that there's a certain amount of balance there that occurs naturally.
Oh, yeah.
That a lot of people would love to be able to have in their own creative process.
Oh, it's been really good. It's been really good because Matthew does the support and Zach does the stabbing in the back. And
yeah, I got friends like that too.
Yeah, but he does it from the most caring of places.
Well, it sounds like, yes, as bad as it is, it's still that trial by fire that every creative process needs. Because, well, let me give you an example. Mel Brooks has helped a lot of people do a lot of movies.
Yeah.
He's helped a lot of people with a lot of skits or scripts. But one of the things that he said that he does, his process is, he will take a script and line by line, he will beat each line with a sledgehammer to make sure that not only is it strong, not only does it endure, not only does it fit, but also to find out how invested the actual writer, the script writer is in their own product.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you can't justify your own product, if you can't push it forward, if you can't proselytize for your own product, that says a lot about your lack of commitment.
Exactly.
So, okay, you know, Zach is kind of like, you know, a lot of people don't see Judas as Jesus's most devoted follower, but you know, there have been people, scholars who said, well, he was Christ's most
he was trying to help
follower.
him reach his full potential.
And not only that, but to show that potential to everyone around.
Exactly.
So I wouldn't characterize you as Jesus or Zach as what's his face, Judas, but to have that process intact, I think goes a long way to ensuring that you produce a better product, or at least one that's more considered.
Exactly. So let me go back to the creating of the whole task thing.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So I'm learning about, you know, the business of animation and how things get from script to screen, and you know, then I'm realizing that the characters that I'm creating, while they reflect the broader population of the globe, they don't necessarily reflect what a television network in America would like to put on the screen.
Okay, all right.
You know, so then I realized that not only am I outside of the studio system, but I'm going to have to make an end run around them. And instead of kind of going through the front door sort of thing, I'm going to have to, in terms of American networks, I would have to go around them and kind of sneak in through the window.
Well, and that goes back to us talking about, you know, the gatekeepers of culture.
Yes.
You know, and you know, they go, yeah, we'd love to put your stuff on, but unfortunately we need to own it.
Yeah.
To do it.
Or more importantly, could you change this character, the lead, you know? Could you change him to a 15-year-old white kid?
Yeah, you know, this big black avenging guy here, can that be a blonde woman? Yeah. No, I get you.
Right, exactly. So, so that was what happened with that. And then I, of course, was going to all the, the black comic book conventions, like the one up in, the Black Comic Book Day up at the Schaumburg. And of course, there's ECBOC, East Coast Black Age of Comics. And, you know, I was meeting all these other black creators of comic books and you know, content and stuff like that. And I was learning from them, and you know, I made some, you know, I was, you know, making relationships and, you know, partnerships and stuff like that. All the while kind of showing off what I was doing, what I was in the process of doing. In terms of like characters for T.A.S.K and stuff like that. And I was getting good feedback. These guys, you know, were like, "Hey, this is great. This is awesome. Tell me more about this." And one guy, actually two guys in particular, someone with special mention, and that would be Chucky Collins, who does a webcomic now called Bounce, which is just destroying Facebook every single 3 days a week. And his partner at Rat Ronin Studios, Keith Miller. And those guys kind of said, what are you doing with this? And I said, I'm doing animation. And they were like, I know somebody you should go to. And they told me early on, but of course I was being a little pigheaded. I was like, I'm going to find an animation studio on my own.
Right.
So, you know, I went over, you know, I'm looking around, I'm shopping around, I'm talking to people. But they keep, every time they see me, they're like, hey, I know a guy. I know a guy.
And it's always the same guy.
Yeah, it's the same guy. And they're like, you should talk to this guy. And I'm like, okay. And they corner me about, this was last year.
Okay.
And the Black Comic Book Day at the Schaumburg happens in February.
Mm-hmm.
So they corner me, and they're like, are you really going to do this? I was like, yeah, I'm really going to do this. I already got a studio lined up, et cetera, et cetera. And they were like, nah, throw that out. You should talk to this guy. Talk to our guy. As a matter of fact, I'm going to call my guy and have him call you. And the guy they got me in touch with was Esteban Valdez of Echo Bridge Studio.
Okay.
And man, oh man, I owe those two guys a real debt. I'm going to have to, pay some type of stipend to them later on in life. Because they knew a guy and it was the right guy. It was the right guy.
Well, I'll tell you something about creatives. And at least for me, sometimes the money is not the important thing. But sometimes if you can just acknowledge the fact that somebody helped you out to get you where you went, that's a pretty cool thing because, a lot of creatives are pretty selfish about their accolades, and they're very selfish about how they present themselves because they want other people to believe that they got where they got completely on their own.
Right.
And I have yet to meet anybody who's managed to pull that off in a way that I believe. So, throw some credits up there. Throw a name in the credits, things
definitely.
like that. Because, it's a great story. And it does show you that there are people out there who genuinely care about what you may do. A lot of people won't take criticism from other people, won't take advice from other people because creatives are rather insular.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's good that you listened. And, you listened after a while.
Yeah.
All right, so where are you with all of these projects?
All right. Well, the thing that we're working on right now is T.A.S.K. And T.A.S.K is this animated series that is a superhero action adventure animated series that is set in our global reality.
Okay.
Right. So what you have is characters of all ethnicities and all colors.
Mm-hmm.
And they exist in this world in a way that hasn't really been seen, I think, ever in terms of a superhero universe.
Right.
Because most of the superhero universes that are presented in the media were created initially in the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
So they were made by certain types of individuals for a certain audience.
Sure.
At the risk, and not at the risk, but and excluding everyone else generally. But now we're in a new century, and it's time for a new universe that looks like everyone else.
Well, and that more reflects the reality of reality.
Yeah.
Yes, you see, you have, and I think that's one of the reasons you exactly stated why one of the reasons everybody who buys an option on a 1930s through the 1960s, 1970s superhero has to do a reboot because what they're trying to do is they're trying to make a character who was created in a far, far different time relevant for the times we're in today.
Yeah.
And you're starting your universe, you're booting your universe in current times.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
So
it is current times.
Yes, Jarvis, it is current times.
No, that's not Jarvis. Jarvis, yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay. Where was I? Because
you were talking about a creative universe that more reflects the multi-ethnicity of the world we live in.
Yes. So realizing, of course, that that wouldn't fly in terms of most American networks. kind of decided that the plan of attack would be getting distribution from a more global source.
Okay.
But first, of course, we had to have something to show them.
Right, you had to create the product.
What we wanted to do was make it so that it was undeniable, that it was so good that if you said no to it, that you'd say no and you'd walk out of the room and you'd kick yourself, saying, I'm an idiot. Why did I just say no to this thing? And then you'd run back in and say, wait a minute. So to that end, Chuck Collins and Keith got me in touch with Esteban Valdez of Equifix Studios.
Right.
Our plan was to create a 1-minute trailer because, to be honest, we couldn't afford more than 1 minute.
Sure. I mean, that's still a lot of production.
Oh, it's a lot of production. But, and also I wanted to make a package for a distributor to look at and for a co-producer to look at that they'd say, okay, you guys did a lot of legwork on this. You guys are serious and this looks good. Let's talk. We're ready to make a serious commitment. So I wanted to show that we were, not just some guys who came in with some drawings. Not that that's a bad thing. A lot of shows are launched on that because of that. But shows are launched because, with those things by people in the system. You might have a guy who's working as an animator at Cartoon Network, and he's like, hey, they're like, oh, we'll accept pitches from you guys next month. And they can walk in with some drawings and, they can pitch with some drawings. They don't because, the people they're pitching to know that they can animate it.
Sure.
For us, we'd have to come in with something a little more substantial.
Right.
So that is what we set out to do last year. And, so it's been scary. It's cost, but, we're almost done with it.
Yeah. And so, you've got the creative part that you've been managing. Since you're in pre-production, what's kind of like the creative versus the business of doing business ratio of your time right now? Are you at the point where you're ready to pitch, or are you still laying your groundwork to get to the point that when you go in, you everything that you show them pretty much takes no off the table?
I'd say we're at 60% of pitch readiness.
Okay.
Which is good because we're looking to pitch later this year, which is October.
Sure.
So we're at a place that's good. In terms of managing throughout, like, say, the last year and early part of this year, it was kind of 50-50 in terms of my focus, because a lot of the character creation and a lot of getting it out to people so I can get a pre-awareness, a certain level of pre-awareness of the product. Because here's the other thing. A lot of times when you pitch to these people, they say, well, do you have an audience? Is there an audience that already knows about this?
Sure.
I want to make sure that when we walk through the door, that I can say, oh yeah, look, how many views do you see here? Yeah, we do have an audience. We have an audience that has been ready to follow this series for the last 2 years, and they've been following us, since then. So we're ready to go. So a lot of what I did over last year and the year before was introducing characters. I mean, I've introduced them on, of course, BlackScienceFictionSociety.com, and a lot of work on Facebook, where we have a pretty good, strong following. What's up, Corey Day? What's up to Van Montgomery? I see you. Those guys, I mean, I started something called Task Tuesday, where I would introduce a character or show a drawing, a piece of animation, something, every Tuesday, almost every Tuesday for the last 2 years.
Okay.
And these guys, there's certain followers of T.A.S.K now who will, and I do it normally at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday. At 10:30, they're like, "Are you ready? Are you coming?" They're sending me instant messages, asking me if, is there going to be a T.A.S.K Tuesday today? Yes, there's going to be a T.A.S.K Tuesday. Just wait, come and give me a half an hour.
Right.
So that's what I want to do. What I wanted to do was to build up an audience that, the theory of the 1,000 fans?
No. Yeah, go ahead.
Every successful franchise, band, rock group, et cetera, starts with 1,000 rabid true fans.
Okay.
And they are the guys who help do your groundwork.
Mm-hmm.
Their word of mouth propels you forward.
Well, those are your disciples.
Yes. And everything that we've done so far is in the service of creating those 1,000 true fans.
Okay.
Because, like you said, they will carry your gospel forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's what we did over the last.
Ahead.
Yeah, that's what we did over the last year and a half, 2 years. Yeah.
All right. Let's talk business. Let's talk marketing.
Yeah.
Right now, you've got a web presence, correct?
Yeah.
And are your characters developed enough that you can market them, like T-shirts, cards, what have you, in a way that your name can be carried some away from electronic distribution? Are you at that point yet? Well, of course, the production of the trailer was such a heavy investment in terms of just financially. Sure.
That there were a lot of things that we wanted to get to do that we couldn't.
Right.
Because, of course, the production of T-shirts, I even started sourcing guys who would be, who could make action figures, who could do the sculpts, and looking at factories in China and stuff like that.
Whoa. Let me back you up. I'm going to give you something away. I'm going to give away a $100,000 idea.
Go.
Don't waste your time in China. Not until you're ready to mass produce.
Oh, I know.
Go get, no. Go get yourself a 3D printer.
That is true.
You're welcome. No charge. I don't mind 15%, but I'm just saying, you don't have to toss it my way because I want to see everybody succeed. I really, really do. Do you mind telling the audience what it costs to do your 1-minute trailer, just to give them an idea of
okay, I'm going to give you, because the studio, of course, would like, they would like to negotiate with people one-on-one. So
which is fine, but let's talk your project, because you have ownership. You know what I mean? And you decided that this was, and very, very smartly, I might add, this was a great way of doing something that reaches a disproportionately large amount of people normally for the money spent.
Right.
So that's why I'm asking for you to let people know what kind of money spent, because, a lot of people, there's the 80-20 rule. 80% is the business of doing business. 20% is your creativity. A lot of people don't realize that, when I start to do something like you've done, you've basically started an entrepreneurial business. And the reason why most entrepreneurial businesses fail is because they're undercapitalized.
Right. If
you can't start your business in a way that you can sustain yourself for 2 years without making a nickel, you're probably going to fail.
Exactly.
Because, so please, if you don't mind, tell people, what kind of money are they talking about if they're going to be serious about putting together, a business along the kind of lines that you have.
All right, what does a Kia cost these days?
I'm sorry, what is?
A Kia, right off the lot.
That car?
Yeah.
I have no idea. I'm an elitist snob. I drive a Volvo.
Well, I could have done the trailer, or we could have bought a Kia.
There you go. So those of you listening, this is what real production costs. This is a real hard cost. And when you talk about marketing, you know, you have to have money. You have to have commitment, because you can't start a business with no money.
Right.
And the other thing about starting a business is, when you do start paying people, you have to pay yourselves first.
Exactly.
A lot of people don't understand that either. Well, I'll just pay all my vendors, and I got some macaroni and cheese and peanut butter here. Maybe I can go get some crackers over at the shelter. So, you know, this is a serious endeavor.
Oh yeah.
And,
I mean,
yeah.
Before we even got to the animation,
Right.
we, of course, were paying our artist, Sean Isaacs, who is in
Right.
South Africa.
Okay.
And we were paying him close to $100 per character.
Right.
We got lucky, number one, because he's very good, and number two, because he's in South Africa, so the conversion rate helped us out.
Right.
And, you know, I didn't know it would, but when he gave me the price, I was like, wait a minute, this? And he said, oh, you don't know what that's worth to me.
Right. Well, the strong dollar helps us in some ways, and in other words, in other ways, like in selling our goods, it really kind of kills your market. But
Right.
but you being able to take advantage of the slide the other way is such a fortunate thing. You know?
Oh yeah. I mean, like I always say, there were so many places along the way that we got really lucky.
Or smart.
Or smart.
Yeah.
You know, because I looked for an artist for months on DeviantArt.
Mm-hmm.
And something about Sean's work just really, it grabbed me. And I said, this guy can do what I want.
What you want to do. He's got he can manifest your vision.
Right. So, and then I contacted him and we talked, and, you know, and I, of course, and this was me being extremely naive, because, you know, as a black person doing this, you want to keep all areas of you want to be like, oh, I want to make sure I give black artists get the work, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm talking to this guy from South Africa. He's got to be black, right?
And
he wasn't.
You found a white boy passing as black, huh?
I found a white boy whose art made it not matter.
Right.
And
right. It transcended race.
It transcended, and the other thing is, Sean couldn't care what he was drawing. When I said, okay, the lead character's a black kid, and he's like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
You know, no reservation from him. I mean, nothing. I mean, everything, of course, all my preconceived notions about South Africa, because I'm a 70s into 80s kid, so I grew up knowing about apartheid, of course.
Well, shoot, you know, we were all glued to the TV for like 4.5 hours waiting for Nelson to come out of prison.
Right. So I'm thinking, you know, the white South African's got to be a villain of the worst kind.
Right.
But, you know, I worked with Sean in, you know, with, you know, creating T.A.S.K characters, him doing the art for them for 1.5 years, and then last year we met for New York Comic-Con. The coolest, most welcoming kid ever.
Isn't that great?
It really is. It really is when humans turn out to be nice.
Yeah, you know, there aren't a lot of people on this planet who transcend race, gender, religion and things like that. And when you make that kind of connection, you know, there's a renewal of faith in humanity that just kind of goes along with that. But then, you know, it helps kind of settle you into realizing the value of creativity over the value of stereotyping and trying to place everybody in a bucket.
Exactly.
You know, where you think they fit. Yeah. And
Yeah. So
that's a great story, man.
yeah. So I mean, that was just a great thing. Just having Sean as part of the team.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I mean, first of all, his art brought so much focus and just so many eyes onto the product because his art is so good. I mean, he's really been a real plus for us. You know, he is part of my team, part of my family, like just any day, any time.
Yeah, and the other thing that this illustrates is the fact that a collaboration from where you are to South Africa not only is easy, but it works so well that it did transcend the racial aspect. The actual personality that you were working with was what you were working with,
right.
Not so-and-so the white guy or, you know, so-and-so the butcher, you know.
Right, exactly. I mean, Sean, at the end of the day, is just Sean. And, you know, Sean can draw. And, you know, and that works out really well.
Mm-hmm,
you know, so, I mean, that was, you know, that was great. That was great.
Yeah,
and here's the other thing that I find interesting about how, you know, what we're doing. Not only is the project global in terms of of the characters, but we've managed now to kind of be global in terms of the people behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, because I mean, I'm in New York. Matthew splits his time a lot between New York and North Carolina. Zach is, of course, in Trinidad.
Right.
Sean is in South Africa, and another part of our team who is very integral to the team, who is our brand manager, who is Mario Sargent. He is also in Trinidad. So I get voices from a lot of different places kind of all the time. And it kind of keeps the whole project grounded in terms of perspective. You know, because, you know, different people are looking from different places and seeing different things.
Right, right. And the fact that all of you can generally agree on how everything's moving forward is also an indication of a kind of universal appeal, too.
Yeah. Well, you know, and, you know, I have a really long cattle prod. So,
well, you know, sometimes, you know, like for me, I have to pay extra for that.
Oh.
But I mean, as long as your process works, I mean, that's the most important thing. Look at this. You've got all these different people spread out all these different places, and you're putting together, based upon what I have seen, just the things that you've shown me, shown us at BlackScienceFictionSociety.com. Those of you who are not members, join, see all of us here, because these are some of the greatest creatives in the world. From the things that I've seen, I mean, dude, your art is great. Well, I've told you that. I've told you that right out. As soon as you post it, I see it. It's great. And so, you know, from my perspective as a writer, my only hope, and it's not a reservation or anything, is that the writing sustains the amount of care you've taken in creating the visual aspect of your universe. And
now that part. No, continue your thought. Sorry.
No, I mean, that's, you know, this is the great unknown for me. I would never judge your project because I don't see that part.
Right.
That's the part that I'm anxiously awaiting to see how your universe operates, how your people behave, you know, what issues, how you formulate, you know, the whole universe to make it come to life. So I'm excited to wait and see how that happens.
And that's the really fun part, because that's the part that Zach and I work on all the time. And now, Zach, of course, what many people don't know, and I should have said earlier on, Zach is a writer, but also went to film school. So Zach graduated from film school. So Zach knows how to write a script.
Well, we know he graduated.
Yeah, well,
you know, we have to wait and see. I mean, Damion, come on.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, okay, I'll give you that one.
Fair enough, yeah. Okay, go ahead, yeah. No, that's good, because, I mean, does he have, he's got real world experience, though.
Yeah.
It sounds like.
Yeah. So he's got that. I've got all my years in theater.
Right.
And between us, I think we've come up with something that will really, really resonate.
Nice.
I think it'll blow the hinges off of what people think is animated action adventure for that
I
genre.
get it. Well, let me ask you this, because, you know, from a marketing point of view and from a practicality, in terms of getting people to see you, are you planning on putting together episodes of your work and getting, you know, putting them up, let's say, on the web in a way that you start to build those eyes? You've got all those people who are waiting for what you've got. You know, all of that, like you said, those 1,000 people who carry the water for you. How are you planning on doing this? Are you going to try to get a distributor and go straight to E-Cable, what have you? Or, you know, are you going to let your fans, like you said, carry the water for you or with you? Well, do you have a business model set in stone yet, or you haven't really set that out yet?
Well, the plan is, and this is why we're doing the trailer and getting everything ready.
Right.
In October, Matthew and I are going to MIPCOM in France.
Okay.
And let me tell people who may not know what MIPCOM is. That is MIPCOM. MIPCOM is the world's largest entertainment marketplace. It is where television basically is bought and sold. House of Cards is on Netflix, right?
Right.
MIPCOM is where House of Cards was bought by Netflix.
Cool. Okay.
So what happens is that creators take their ideas, take their content, take their pilot episodes, their trailers, they go to MIPCOM, and they secure a distributor, then secure a co-production, and then they make a show. And it gets on television. It sounds simple, but the steps you have to go through to get to that point, it's a lot.
And not only that, but you still have to have something worthy.
Exactly.
There's no assumption that just because you showed up with something, you're going to get something.
Exactly. You're totally correct. You're totally correct. But you have to get there with a certain level of quality. You have to get there with a fully formed product. And that's our goal, to get there with a fully formed product. And to see.
Well, your artwork is, dude.
And you can't wait till you, oh my goodness. The trailer is, right now they're putting final post-production. I think they're putting titles and last lighting effects on the trailer.
Okay.
When the trailer is ready. The trailer is what you have seen in terms of, let's say, a 2D animation cartoon on Cartoon Network. Justice League, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
It is on that level. We are on the same playing field.
How cool is that?
It is very cool.
And it's got to be doubly exciting for you because you know you went from sitting on the couch watching Justice League, you know,
probably
beers,
mm-hmm.
yeah, and from that, I mean, you actually marched the march to get where you are now.
Yeah,
and you're still not done. If you were to consider how much more work you have in terms of the percentage you have finished, how much more work you have before you go to MIPCOM, you know, are you 50% done? Are you 75% done? I mean, what's your best guess estimate?
All right. Let me tell you what we would need to walk into a meeting at MIPCOM with.
To take a meeting, sure.
Okay. Trailer, and this is just me. We don't necessarily need it, but for me, we need to have it.
Mm-hmm.
So the trailer, we need to have the series Bible,
mm-hmm.
And we need to have 26 episodes arced out and 3 episodes completely written.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Right. At this point, Zach and I are putting the finishing touches on episode 5.
Okay.
And
in terms of writing, right?
In terms of writing.
Okay.
And the first season is arced out. As a matter of fact, I know where we end on season 3.
Okay. Is it a cliffhanger?
And even if we only get 3 seasons, I know where it would end.
Okay.
And and we're talking 22-minute episodes. Because of course, you're allowing for commercial breaks.
Commercial breaks in a half-hour episode. Yeah.
So we have those things. So
mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how that translates into percentages, but it's pretty good.
It sounds like you have the best chance of being ready.
That's my goal, to walk into that room and, like I said, have something undeniable. If you say no, then I'll tell you a funny story.
Later.
I'll tell you a funny story.
Okay.
I know an artist, like a musical artist, who does Trinidadian soca music. His name is Marshall Montano, and he actually is one of the biggest artists in terms of soca in the planet.
Okay.
And at one point, he was signed there was a record label called Delicious Vinyl Records. Shaggy was on that label at one point.
Oh, all right, yeah.
Okay, so he's at Delicious Vinyl, and he's talking to one of the A&Rs, who is, the people in charge of artists and repertoire, what they used to have back in the day.
Right.
And that person said, I don't want you to ever tell anyone this, but I passed on the Wu-Tang Clan. And I want it to be that if you say no to T.A.S.K, years later, you will whisper to people as if you were the person who passed on the Wu-Tang Clan.
Right.
That's what I want.
That's truly excellent. And you know what? If you don't have the conviction of your own work, then you ought not be in business.
Yep.
You ought not be in business. If you were going to give some advice to people who may not have been on the couch with you when you were talking about, when you came to that revelation, what advice do you give people who want to start out, or people who may be in the early parts of the process? Let's talk about 2 things. Let's talk about what's the best part of all of the work that you've put in.
The best part.
Yeah. Because you don't go home crying like a baby every day.
No.
You got to feel good about, I mean, what's the best part of, just deciding to, on that couch, to say, hey, we can do this.
On a Tuesday, when I drop a new character that no one has seen before.
Right.
And I drop the character, and there's the bio, and there's the history of the character, and there's the abilities of the character and everything.
Right.
And people start talking about it.
Bam! You drop it, and then all of a sudden you've got that buzz.
Oh. I mean, it just, and the people who are talking about it
right.
are not just your layman fan, but you're also talking about people in the industry.
Right.
So you might get a Joseph P. Illich who used to work at Milestone and who at one point was editor of the entire Batman line for DC, saying something like, "This is cool, I like this." Or you get Robert Garrett, who you might know, who does Exmoor Studios, Galto, and Ajala, A Series of Adventures with N. Stephen Harris. You get those guys saying, that's cool. Or Uraeus, who does Jason Wise, saying, this is hot, I like that. Guys that you look up to, but you're on that level where you're like almost peers, but they're putting in a whole lot of work because they're out there at these conventions, and you've gone to them and you've spoken to them, and these guys, they have a certain amount of weight with their confirmation.
And you respect them for their accomplishment.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
When you have, someone like Machindo, who everyone looks up to in terms of, I mean, Machindo's the gold standard of I don't know, this genre of art, saying this is excellent. You're good. You're good.
Yeah.
So that feels really great. That's one of those things that really, that's a great feeling. Here's the other one. When the studio sends me updates on the trailer and the progress that's being made, I show it to my daughter, and she says, that's cool. Yeah, that's 10 points right there.
Oh, that's more than 10 points.
Yeah, that's 100 points to Gryffindor.
And that's a hug that takes your breath away.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
It is very cool.
And if you were going to advise somebody about the worst mistake that could be made or the thing that they should look out for that you've learned about in the time that you've been putting all this together, what would that be?
Don't think you know what you're doing too early.
Watch out for arrogance or overconfidence.
Yeah. Because you think you've done all the homework, but you really haven't.
Right.
Because you are stepping into whole new fields of endeavor that you have 30% of the information. But there's always pieces missing in the puzzle.
Sure. And then, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of, here's something really simple. A logo. A logo has to service so many different things that it has to be universal yet engaging.
Right.
A lot of guys make stuff that's engaging, but it won't work on a lunchbox or as a tiny little logo on the foot of an action figure.
Sure. And,
you know.
That's very. You can't overstate that because you're talking about a visual medium and you're talking about an artistic endeavor where, a very, very small graphic has, in some ways, not only tell your story, but to excite a certain level of curiosity so that people take the second step of, oh, yeah, that's cool, but they take the second step to go, I wonder what these guys are about.
Right. And then eventually this thing has to identify you to whoever's looking at it immediately. They have to look at it and say, what is that? No, they have to look at it and say, oh, yeah, those guys, T.A.S.K, I know that.
Right. And then the last thing, out of the three of you that you've discussed, and this is not so much for the artist, but as you are going along and having to do, be about the business of doing business, which one of you is probably the most likely going to be kind of the headliner in terms of the, really pushing the business forward?
Oh, they leave that to me.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure.
They leave that to me. Matthew is in the back being, now, here's the other thing. Matthew is 6'8". So Matthew is the rock. And, he's the foundation, and he and I kind of, do a lot of the, throwing money at things, although he throws substantially more money than I do. So that's, Matthew has that going for him.
Sure.
I of course am the mouthpiece and the face. Zach is the person with the shank.
Yeah, he was upset a little while ago because you had the nerve to talk about the cattle prodding.
Oh.
I think he felt that you were trespassing on his domain to inflict pain on other people, or not pain. Let's call it to incentivize other people.
He's just, Zach, that is a different kind of prodding. I will leave it at that.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna let this go. Let that go. And let's do this. Let's go ahead. We had that break in there, but we're right at the time where we've got about 2 hours worth of show.
Wow.
First of all, I want to thank you, Matt. It didn't seem like 2 hours, did it?
No, it didn't.
And then let's go ahead, and I want to thank you because this has been great. I had a great time talking. Did you have a good time?
Listen, I finally get to talk to Will Hayashi. After all us yelling boo at each other in the chat room.
Yeah, it's been fun. No, I mean it's really fun, and it's always great to actually meet somebody who I just type at.
Right.
This is the best part of me doing this gig. But I want to thank you for man, this has been great, and to be able to talk about, we don't get people who have as much fun talking as you did. I mean, I hope it wasn't tiresome for you, but I think it was great. And you certainly made my job easier. And that really, in the final analysis, that's really all that's important about this show. As long as I have an easy time of it, and then
of course. I mean, once you get to sit back and just every now and then just say, how was that?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And just let me fill in the blanks. That's really good.
But let's do this. One of the things that I do want you to do, and you already know to do it, but if you're going to go to different cons, and even the one in France, who knows? Maybe we got some, let's see, what do they call him? Some frog listening to the show. But and that was just a racist joke on my part.
Oh yeah, it really was.
But any place that you're going to be, obviously, it would be great if you posted up in the in the calendar section, so that if people in your area, and we got a ton of BSFS members in your neck of the woods. So obviously drop any appearance that you're going to have, put it on the events calendar so people can find you and meet you. We've met like this, but one day you're going to come to C2E2 and we're going to be able to sit down and have dinner, and that'll be great. And so, the biggest part about this show is to introduce the members of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website to each other. And this has been a great time, and I've had a great chat with you. So I want to thank you about that. And Jarvis is telling me on the other side that we are over time. So let me just turn the show over to Jarvis so he can end it, and then hang around for a little while in case anybody else has any more comments or questions in the chat room. Okay?
Will do.
All right.
You are unmuted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool, because I had to do some jerry-rigging with my iPad to make sure that the audio is being recorded. But anyway, technical difficulties aside, you guys did a great job. Thank you so much for spending your time with us and sharing what's going on with the project. And after 3 years of talking to Damion on the internet, I think this is the first time we talked, man.
Yeah, this is the first time we've actually heard each other's voices. That's really weird.
Well, I know I sound kind of funny to myself on the phone, so I'm recording, so I'm pretty sure I'm sounding crazy now. But Damion represented us. I think it was maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago at one of the events. So
at ECBA.
Yep. You made it there before I did. I enjoyed it.
Yep, I did.
I think that's going on next week or something. Real soon.
It is next weekend.
Okay, you going this year?
I was planning to, but my daughter has her ballet recital showcases the exact same date.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Believe me, I understand. My little boy plays 3 different sports, so juggling all of that and stuff that I do and my wife do is real interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where it would be nice to go, but I can't be late because she is at the age now where she is in every number. she's in every dance. And she's one of those kids who is really good. I mean, she actually goes to a professional performing arts school now.
Oh wow!
So when she dances, and to miss it, I'll be in the doghouse for months.
All right, make sure to get those on tape too.
Will do. Jarvis, you've seen her.
Look, you probably got multiple cameras and everything set up, switching.
Well, we're trying to get it professionally done.
All right, but to everybody that's listening, thank you so much for tuning in. Keep supporting us, and we'll keep supporting you when you have projects and things of that nature. Your products, whether it's comics, radio shows, books, whatever. That's what we do. We share amongst each other and with the world what creations the members are doing. But thanks again, Will, for making it entertaining as always.
Yes.
Anytime. And then why don't you go ahead and say good night, and then we'll pause for about 5 seconds, and then we can pick up any other questions that anybody has. How's that sound?
That works. Well, once again, good night to everybody. Thanks for tuning in, whether it's live or catching this on the recording. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye. 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 Bye.